So hello everyone, welcome to Café Scientifique. We're just waiting to have everyone from the waiting room in the cafe in the main feature, and then we'll have a go. Is everyone in now, Marcus? Yes. Okay. Hi everyone. Welcome to the Café Scientifique. Before I start, I would like to alert you to the fact that the cafe is recorded. So my name is Gisela Helfer, and I will be your host tonight together with my colleague Bana Shriki. And so this is our monthly event that brings you the latest ideas in science and technology to you currently via Zoom, unfortunately, but I hope we soon be able to do that together in person at the National Science and Media Museum. The Café Scientifique is a collaboration between the University of Bradford, the National Science and Media Museum, and the theatre at the Mill. So before Bana will introduce our speakers, Karina Croucher and Adrian Evans, to you, I want to just give you some quick housekeeping rules and talk you through the evening, and then Bana will start off the cafe and the talk. So as I said, the cafe is recorded, so if you prefer not to be on screen, you will have to turn off your video camera. We will have first the introduction by Bana of our speakers, then we have about a 20 to 30 minute talk. And then we'll have a short break, a few minutes to give you time to get some refreshments. And afterwards, we hopefully have a very lively discussion with our speakers. We would love to have you on camera and ask your own questions if you want to do that, but you're very welcome, if you prefer not to do that, to just put your questions into the chat box, and Bana and I will be very happy to ask the questions on your behalf. We have some technical wizards in the background who will look at the chat box and do everything in the background, so they will be by magic turn off, make sure that you will be unmuted if you want to ask your own question, and do everything what they need to do in the background. So we have the chat box here, so just during the talk, feel free to already put in your questions, and then when it comes to the discussion time, Bana and I will ask you to come on, to unmute and come on and speak and ask your own question. Yes, and that's about everything from me. Bana, do you want to introduce our speakers, please?
Good evening, everyone. So today's speakers are from the University of Bradford, School of Archaeological and Forensic Sciences. Karina, our first speaker, she looks into understanding the past and its role today, with a focus on the role cultural heritage plays in identity, social cohesion, and providing sense of place, particularly for displaced and host communities, while Adrian studies the use of digital heritage as a tool in societal and economic growth, and he is working with displaced communities to test the use of digital heritage to build resilience. He has designed and developed microstructures like scanners for object documentation to aid fragmented objects drifting to be used in later projects. So today's topic is building community resilience through heritage, which is basically a project led by Bradford academics in collaboration combining the efforts of Mercy Corps and UNHCR and the camp managements in Jordan to protect the Syrian valuable heritage. Today, we will hear the project's holistic approach to utilize technology to rehabilitate refugees and empower their cultural identity while building resilience and strong relationship with the host communities via intercultural festivals. So to you, Karina and Adrian, thank you.
Hi, it's Adrian kicking us off. Welcome to this evening. We've also got Owen Green in the audience and Andrew Wilson in the audience, who are collaborators on the project. So just say hi. And Adrian, are you there?
Sorry, I think I'm at the back. No.
We can hear you now, Adrian.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, it's nice to see Tom's in the audience as well. So we've got a bit of a full house. So this evening we're going to be going through our work that we've been doing in Jordan with refugees, the BREATHE project, building resilience through heritage. And I'll start off by talking about the sort of long pathway that we've been on to get to where we are today. It's been this really good collaborative effort, and it's got multiple origin stories. But from my side, I got a large project with Andy Wilson, Fragmented Heritage, which had multiple collaborators, and it was about trying to develop new digital technologies for use in archaeological sciences and forensics. And we spent quite a bit of time trying to do a great deal of work, working on structured light scanners for object documentation, working in the Kenyan desert, searching for fossils, and looking at stone tools under the microscope. It's a multi-scale project, so that's one element of the work that's brought us in this direction. This digital heritage has come from that and other projects. Coming into this project has been collaborations with Mercy Corps, a partner that we've got that helps us get into camps. I'll do it more later on, and also Jordan Heritage. Jordan Heritage are an NGO, a charity in Jordan. We began collaborating as part of the Fragmented Heritage work when we were doing some of our work there in Jordan. And of course, the Continuing Bronze Project, Karina's going to talk about that as we move forwards. So yeah, in Jordan, in 2013, we were testing some of our drones that were actually designed to go and deploy to work in Kenya to look for fossil exploration, and we'd had this collaboration with looking at stone tools that took us to be working on a site in the Eastern Desert, Karina 4, and we thought that would also be a nice place to test some of our high resolution drone technology. So the image here, this is Tom Sparrow and I with Daniel McDonald out in the Jordanian desert flying our drone to get a very high resolution image of the ground surface there. And it just happened that is in the Eastern Desert, very near Azraq. We stayed in Azraq. The house that we were renting was rented to us by somebody who worked at the refugee camp that's just around the corner. You can see it on the way to the site. And whilst we were working there, you couldn't help but think about what goes on inside that camp, what life could possibly be like if they, I was thinking about do they know how rich the archaeology that's just around the corner from them is, and it began this chain of events that led towards us trying to do some work with archaeology and with heritage within the camp. But there's multiple experts required to do that sort of work, and one of those is the need to work with in the international development, which is where Owen comes in, and with workshops, which is where Karina's work really falls into place.
Yeah, so one of the motivations behind the project was the Continuing Bonds project, which was a collaboration between archaeology, healthcare and psychology at Bradford, and with a hospice in Leicester, where we used the past as a safe and distanced way to get people talking about difficult topics, in this case, death, bereavement, death, dying and bereavement. And we discovered that actually the past can be really powerful in breaking down the barriers and getting people to talk. And we explored that through designing quite dynamic workshops, which then informed the brief project, both in terms of the workshop and engagement element, but also in terms of using archaeology for well-being, for resilience, and using the heritage and archaeology to try and link people and get them talking about difficult topics, which brings me to talking about the brief project. So it was this collaboration between Adrian and Andy Wilson with digital heritage, myself with archaeology and wellbeing, Owen Green with his background in peace studies and international development. And we wanted to test how the ability of a digital heritage to aid in social cohesion and resilience. We wanted to see if it could be used amongst host and displaced communities in Nasraq. And where am I? In Nasraq, you'll see here that we've got a picture of Nasraq camp in the desert in Jordan, and so it was Nasraq camp was our kind of prime site of working, and yeah, we ran events which we'll talk to you about in a moment in both the camp and the town.
So yeah, Nasraq camp, just out there in the Eastern Desert, is an interesting place. It's being one of the largest refugee camps in the world. It's the second Syrian refugee camp in Jordan, resulting from the obviously displacement that's happened from the war that's been happening in Syria. And brought to that camp are people from all over Syria. So that I've got a bit of a map here with just to give you an idea of the variety of different individuals that are in this place, and a satellite image of the camp. And this is really to show this kind of scale of the place. I've got a little inset of what the camp looks like from the ground. These tin huts are sort of individual houses. And we ended up working through a series of events in Village 5. It was somewhere that we thought was going to be really interesting to do work because of the particular circumstances there. That particular village is effectively a prison. Well, I shouldn't call it prison, but the perception of the individuals there is that it feels like it's a prison within a prison, because it's the high security area. Individuals within Village 5 aren't allowed to leave. They're not allowed to go to the mall that's even on the camp. Any resources that get brought to them. It was one of the last places in the camp to get electricity 5 years ago. And that's because the individuals there are brought from regions and have come without any paperwork. They're not really trusted. There's concerns that they might already be radicalized. And so it's sort of a desperate place within a place that's already quite desperate. And we thought that of all the places where we might try and do something that's of value, this would be a nice place to begin. So yeah.
Yeah, so we're working with communities that have been severed from their physical location, so they no longer have access to the tangible heritage. So the more traditional heritage we might think of, the castles and the monuments, and they've often had difficulty in expressing their intangible heritage. So even celebrating their food, their dancing, their music has by circumstance become really restricted. And we realise that these are in some way secondary to the basic needs of survival, but we're also interested in celebrating that very rich cultural heritage that is part of their identity and it hasn't been able to be expressed and explored in recent years. So with that approach, we wanted to try and do something to aid in that transfer of cultural memory, to stop there being such a gap and such a severance in it. So working with our partners, Mercy Corps, we went into a Village 5 with a series of workshops, initially just to introduce ourselves and what we're up to, and to talk about the concept of heritage. It might be a term that we use quite freely and quite regularly, but we soon realised that there wasn't a kind of universal translation for heritage, and the concept itself needed unpicking. So we introduced ourselves to in several workshops. We divided the participants by gender and according to age groups, aimed to design to give as safer space as possible, so that people felt more freely able to articulate their thoughts and their experiences and their feelings amongst the groups they were with. And we talked to them about the heritage, and we wanted to find out what they thought was important. So we introduced them to the virtual reality, which Adrian is going to come on to next. And we were trying to canvass what kind of sites they would like to see recreated in virtual reality. We're very keen that we didn't want to dictate to them what was important and what was valuable.
So yeah, the virtual reality approach is what we've really hung a lot of this work on, because it's founded in this notion of digital heritage and how that might be useful within within this sort of community well-being setting. And so you've seen some images just now of people wearing headsets. We've got a few images here, and what we'd done in those initial workshops was poll the different communities there that have come from these different regions within across Syria, that have got these different subcultures and different concepts of what they value as heritage, and poll them about where the places that they value, particularly actually focusing on, in this case, on places. And we got lists of all sorts of interesting things that some of which we knew about, places that have been big tourist attractions in the past, and others that weren't on our radar at all. And the plan was to take that information and to try and recreate some of these places as virtual environments, so they could share those across their friendship groups or potentially new friendship groups, across subcultures within the camp, and between different levels within the families. So we took these virtual reality setups out there. This is the HTC Vive system. You may have seen these if you've done a lot of gaming. They're increasingly popular, of course, and there's the Oculus Quest and Oculus Go systems as well. There's a whole array of different virtual reality technology that can be used in this way. It's really, what's key is the product that's actually being used within those. And it's not always an easy step to produce that sort of content. Some of it can be taken directly from imagery that's already being produced by tourists themselves or specialist groups, where they'll create these virtual reality spaces. And we did use some of that pre-made content of places rather than trying to recreate it ourselves, because it was all about getting the content to the individuals in the camps. But one of the things that comes from the Fragmented Heritage Project and the Curious Travellers aspect of that was the notion of trying to use crowdsourced web scraped imagery as a mechanism for reconstructing lost and at-risk heritage. And that's a methodology that's based, as I say, on taking imagery from the web, normally tourist imagery. So, as you'll all have probably experienced when you've gone somewhere that you've enjoyed, you'll take photographs of it. There's some pictures here of people wandering around Palmyra, taking photographs of the place. And many of those pictures, when they're uploaded onto social media or, photographic repositories, Flickr was a very early example of this, they'll have GPS tags or place tags just by name. We can use those to scrape large bodies of imagery, and using computer algorithms, structure from motion, photogrammetry techniques, by using feature detection within those images, we can, just as we do with our human eyes, you can work out the 3D volume of a space because we've seen 2 of it. You can extrapolate from there with multiple angles and produce good 3D volumetric information of places, and then just take that and put that into virtual reality as close to photorealistic models. And one of the nice things about many of the places in Syria is, prior to the war, it's been a rich place for tourism. So it's one of those destinations where there are lots of photographs that are online that can be scraped for this sort of work. This is an example of some of that. I tried to convey the idea of what of what the VR environment looks from the inside, because that's hard to put across into a talk. But here I am in our virtual reality lab at on the campus, wandering around a model that's been produced of the Temple of Bel in Syria using this crowdsourced process by that Curious Traveller project and by Tom Farrell. And that and here we're seeing one of the first examples of one of our refugee community members wandering around. And the really neat thing that I'm afraid I don't have the audio for this for you to listen to, but it turned out that she's actually from Palmyra, and she used to go to the Temple of Bel for lunch with her husband. It's a place that she's very familiar with. She's here describing where the trees were in the past, what the place used to look like, and so it was clear from this sort of interaction that as a method it can draw deep emotions and historic memory of what these places are, and start that sharing process. This was one of the first times that her friends that are in the room realised that where she was actually from. It's the first time they've heard her talk about her past and what she used to do there. And you can see here she actually gets quite emotional through this process. And it brings me on to a point that's quite important here that we need to cover, really. It's the concept of safeguarding. We've always been aware through this sort of work that we could potentially do more harm than good by bringing up this sort of memory. And so with this approach, we've deeply embedded, very gracious to the efforts of partnership with Mercy Corps and their psychosocial support workers, to ensure that we're doing this in a way that's sort of ethical and it's got long-term management. And so, this lady from Palmyra ends this first experience with emotion that's simply quite negative, but because she's remembering, that she no longer going for lunch with her husband. She doesn't see her husband anymore, and she's obviously not in her homeland. But through that process, through the sharing experiences, through the support network, she's come back into this, and it's actually turned into, in the long term, into a very positive experience. And that's the sort of pattern that we've seen throughout the interactions that we've had with this sort of stuff. So from that sort of experience, we built up this corpus of environments and experiences that we could use in VR, and it steamrolled from the idea of just using digital heritage to something that was a bit richer. So when we went back, not the final time, but the last time we had an event there was we took back the VR equipment with these environments, but we also had photography of different places within Syria and these different towns, places that some of them we couldn't make conditions in VR because they weren't on those tourist hotspots, and that you could only find the odd photograph of. We obviously wanted to cater for everybody in the camp so they could have the same sort of sharing experience. And we also tried some of the intangibles. So people came with food that they cooked, and we had meals from slightly different regional variations, storytelling, song and dance, and it turned into a bit of a cultural festival. It was really quite nice. And as part of that, we recognised that some of the basic needs of society were lost from the camp situation that had been created. And a good example of that, I think Karina wants to talk about, is the way in which some of the female cultural practices have been lost from the way in which this camp normally structures itself.
Yeah, so one of the things that was really great, so we had the 2-day cultural heritage festival within the camp, which saw people coming and going throughout the 2 days, and it was really vibrant, lots of dancing, but it soon became apparent that it was men doing the dancing, and we were speaking to the women and they were saying, yeah, we dance in private, and it transpired that actually they hadn't had a chance to get together and dance since they'd come to the camp. So we turned one of the caravans that was showing the virtual reality. We shut off a virtual reality for a while and we turned it into a dance space for the female members of the community, to just have a private dance session. And I think that's probably one of the most emotional parts of the whole thing, the fact that they hadn't had the chance to dance in, for some of them, 5 years, and they, it's just it felt a real honor to be able to be in the room and be part of that. And so we also, as well as the cultural heritage event in the camp, I should say it obviously wasn't just us. The kids in the camp had created little cardboard model houses of Syrian houses. The people had brought photographs that were on display. So they had an exhibition of photographs of Syria too. And we then had a parallel event in the town a few weeks later, where we worked with our collaborators, the South Azraq Women's Association, who put on the cultural heritage event one evening, attended by around 200 odd people, which showcased local Chechen, Druze and Bedouin dancing, food, handicrafts, and again sites that they had chosen by the participants as important were displayed in the virtual reality. So it was that really dynamic event which kind of brought together in a real kind of fusion the generations and the cultures from across South Azraq. And have we got another sound clip here, Adrian?
Oh, the sound's not working, Karina. Yeah, I was going to play a nice clip of the Syrian dance going on in the town to sort of wrap it up, but I think
we can circulate that to you after.
Circulate a link, yeah.
Yeah, so we had this dynamic event in the town, and we returned back around a month later to gather some feedback from the participants in the camp and in the town. We got to talk to the local mayor, who talked about how the event had transformed the way they do things in the town, and they'd now changed their cultural events that they put on. And yeah, they're gonna and I'm not gonna, we've got some quotes here on the slide from some of the participants. I'm not going to read them all out. I think we're going to come to a close here to allow you to digest some of the quotes and some of the feedback, and then enter into discussion a bit more casually, so we can tease out some of the details and talk about any areas you're interested in. So yeah, so that's us. That's the end of our formal part of the presentation.
Thank you so much. That was really, really interesting.